Other nights we eat all greens, but on this night only bitter herbs.
Why do we eat something bitter? We don't normally eat things bitter, we like things sweet.
To remind us, even though all the things that we're sitting here and acting like kings and queens, we should remember that we were some time ago slaves and that we didn't always have this good life.
And it was a very, very bitter time. Children were separated from their parents. Parents were separated from each other. Everyone had to work very hard. They were whipped. It wasn't a happy time. It was very, very bitter.
American Jews know of bitter herbs, or maror, as horseradish. In the ancient world, the Jews ate whatever was growing in the desert in the spring, which was a bitter herb, a bitter green. Some Jews have two different kinds of bitter herbs. One that is immediately bitter, like horseradish root, or one that's slowly bitter, like romaine lettuce.
In some cultures, people eat very, very, very bitter herbs till tears run from their eyes. In other societies, they eat a very much milder form of bitter herbs. That does qualify to some extent the experience of the Seder and make it relate to the experience of the people who are now sitting around that table.
Why is it so important to recount and tell the story over and over again? We've been doing this for 3,000 years. Why?
So you can remember and so you know that they were slaves and we shouldn't just go by it like they're the slaves, so who cares?
Who cares about them being slaves, but do we care that maybe we too can become slaves?
Yeah.
Can it happen to us?
Yeah.
And has it happened to us in different generations?
Yes.
Has it happened to you in your generation that suddenly people living as they did in your town in Zamość, 300, 400 years, not bothered by anyone, suddenly they became slaves? Did that happen?
It happened.
How did it happen?
Time of the Holocaust, the time of when Hitler started the war in Poland.
And do you think it's important for myself and David to know the whole story, to experience it all over again?
Why to give it to the next generation? Otherwise, it would be forgotten. It has to go on from generation to generation.
The Pharaoh and the Egyptian people, under his orders, wanted simply to make a genocide and to make the Jews disappear. In November 42, all of France was occupied by the Germans. When the Jews had to go in hiding, then it was very difficult to have to find food. And for Passover, it was difficult to find matzot and all the necessary things for the Passover plate, even in the village where my husband's family was. First year, they found matzot, but they didn't find Aggadot. Then it's the reason why they began to write by themselves and by heart an Aggadah for the Pesach Seder. And they had such a spiritual strength with this first work that they decided to go on every year and to work for a new Aggadah. All the family was involved in this holy work. It was by chance that they found old notebooks. And for the first one, my husband wrote the text of the Aggadah, and his father made the pictures. And I suppose that in my husband's family, there was a deep feeling that what they were doing, this sort of holy work, put them in touch with all the generations of Jews before them, all along the centuries, who did other sort of holy work, but something of the same inspiration to go on being Jews, even in the most difficult times. All the Aggadot were a mixture of difficulties and hope for a better future. And at the end of the three last Aggadot, my father-in-law illustrated with the man arriving in Jerusalem. The Aggadah was one form of this spiritual resistance. we felt a very full identification with the Jews in slavery in Egypt. We were in slavery in France, but the persecution, the humiliation, the danger was, of course, not the same, but we felt an identification with them. And the hope for a liberation in the celebration of Passover was gave us a terrific strength.
On all other nights, we do not dip our herbs even once. On this night, why do we dip them twice?
On all other nights, we eat sitting or reclining, but on this night, we all recline.
On all other nights, we eat either sitting upright or reclining. On this night, we only recline. Mishi, do you know why we recline tonight?
Yeah, because we want to feel like free men in our own tent.
Right?
Right, to separate out from having been slaves in the land of Egypt, and now we are free people and we can be as we wish in our own tents, reclining, relaxing.
And the Bedouin, because they sit on carpets, relax by reclining. And that's what we're doing tonight. And the wonderful thing that they say to guests when they arrive is, recline and relax.
The story of being slaves. Avadim hoyinu, slaves we were, leFaro de Mitzrayim, to Pharaoh in Egypt. And we cried
unto the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice, and saw our affliction and our labor and our oppression.
And the Lord brought us out of Egypt, not through an angel, and not through a seraph, and not through an intermediary, but the Holy One, blessed be He, in His glory and with His own being, as it is said.
As the verse says, I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood, fire, and pillars of smoke.
We've talked about how God took us out of Egypt with a great hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror. We've just read all those paragraphs, and now we're going to find out how he or she brought 10 plagues on the Egyptians to sort of convince them that he meant business. Each of us seems to have different customs on how or what to do when we read off the 10 plagues. How do you do it in your home?
Our family custom is that we hold the cup and we spill just a little bit of wine, a drop of wine, for each of the 10 plagues to show that somehow we are diminished by the suffering of others, even though they were our oppressors.
Fraud. Fraud. The Egyptians may have enslaved us, but when we needed them, when we were starving, they took us in. We want to recognize that they did some good also. So when we read the plagues, we take a drop out, a reminder, because when someone else is hurt, our cup is not so full.
Slave of the firstborn. Piece by piece, the judgment of God was brought against the entire societal structure. All of the things that were important to the Egyptians became items that were visibly attacked by God and shown to be false. So the Nile was a god, and it turned to blood. And various reptiles were important to the Egyptians as sacred objects, and they became sources of torment. And you can go through all of the plagues in that way, until, of course, you get to the last plague. That struck at the heart of the Egyptian future. When the firstborn died, when the head of households died, as the rabbis tell us, then in effect the Egyptians were being told, if you continue to enslave the Jews, your future will be a future of destruction. The Passover lamb was part of the experience of the 10th plague. The Jews were asked to sacrifice a lamb, to take the blood, and to sprinkle it on the doorposts of their homes. In this way, the angel of death knew that here was a Jewish home, the children here would be safe.
Dam. You know, the way God freed us, there were 10 plagues. He could have just slayed the firstborn, but he didn't. He did everything slowly. Even Pharaoh could be redeemed. And he wanted to give him a chance.
Locusts.
Choshev.
Darkness.
Makat Bechoros.
Slaying of the firstborn.
Those were the 10 plagues.
When the Jews left Egypt, they entered the desert where they wandered for 40 years. The most important event there was the revelation at Sinai, where the 10 Commandments and the entire Bible were given to Moses. The 40 years in the desert were important because during this time, Egyptian cultural influences were stripped away from the Jews. When they then entered Israel at the end of the 40 years, they were ready to be a Jewish people, not just in name, but culturally as well.
What really Dayenu is talking about the fact that God's goodness knows no bounds, and we would be grateful to God even if God had not done everything that was done for us. Let's do some translation of these verses. Okay? You want to do that? Go ahead. You can start. From wherever you'd like. How about this one?
Had he slain the firstborn and not given us their property, it would have been enough for us.
Dayenu. Next.
Had he given us their property and not divided the sea for us, it would have been enough for us.
Dayenu.
The verses of Dayenu lead to a rousing chorus in an ancient Persian custom. Everyone wheels green onions as they recall the harshness of slavery.
Really what the goal of Pesach was about. Not to get out of Egypt, not to go in the desert, not even to get the Torah. It was to get into the land of Israel and to be able to serve God at the temple.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen.
Wine is what Jews traditionally use to make sacred the secular. Wine, according to Jewish law, is the only beverage that has a special blessing on it. Wine goes back to the days of the Bible being the first beverage mentioned in the Bible. First beverage mentioned is the vine, the fruit of the vine. For 8 generations, the Herzog family has been producing kosher wines.
We feel that, we're continuing the tradition of our family, and it's a special feeling. We're doing what our grandfathers did, and even in this modern times, it's still the same.
Similar to any good winery, with the high-tech equipment that we have, from beginning to end, it's computerized. The only different thing is that all the employees working are Orthodox and know the rules of kosher wine and general wine. Kosher wine, just like kosher food, basically means pure and natural. You should not add any non-kosher ingredients, any animal ingredients, any gelatins, which is used occasionally to filter wines. Rule number 2 is the wine must be handled from beginning of crush till bottling by Sabbath-observant Jewish people. Kosher sweet wine is an American myth. During the late 19th century, when Eastern European Jews came over and were looking for grapes to produce kosher wine, all they had in the eastern seaboard, especially in upstate New York, was a very tartaric and acid grape, which almost couldn't produce a drinkable wine. The only way they can drink the wine was to make the wine sweet by adding sugar. It's something that people got used to drinking because that was the only wines available in America. kosher sweet wines are still a very big part of the kosher wine industry, but it's also kosher Chardonnays and Bordeaux's and Israeli wines of high quality dry wines that are kosher and that are just as permissible to use during the Passover table as a sweet wine.
Since we like you and we don't want everybody to have too much bitterness, we're going to add to the charoset some wine.
What's charoset?
What's it made out of?
Water.
Cement.
Sweet apples.
Apples. And what else?
Sometimes cinnamon.
Figs,
Right.
dates. What else
Figs, dates, nuts.
All
You can make it any different way you want, but it usually has at least one or two things that are part of the Pesach story. The Pesach story has apples because the children were hidden under apple trees in Egypt.
They were?
Yes. Gee, you learned something.
I did.
Yes. And we have figs or dates, which are native to the land of Israel.
Haroset symbolizes the mortar that the Jews used when they were building the cities for the Egyptians. But it also represents the diversity of the Jewish people. And what's very exciting to me is that Jews all over the world on one night are celebrating Passover Seder. Yet the foods are very different.
What countries? You put some more of those pomegranates in. We think this needs to be a little wetter.
I always try to have at least 3 different kinds of haroset to show this diversity.
I might have to put a little bit more of that in.
You'll see the pomegranates and the nuts and the dates in the Yemenite haroset. Jews that went from Palestine to Iraq make one with just dates.
The haroset that we make today is actually the same haroset that our forefathers and foremothers used to make in Iraq. It is still made only of dates. This is exactly what they meant when they said the land of milk and honey. The honey they refer to was actually the date jam that we make today. That is the honey of biblical times.
Jews that went to Spain and Portugal made haroset rolled in little balls the size of a walnut. Jews from Morocco are descendants of Jews from Spanish and Portuguese countries, and they make these round balls for their Passover Seder. So through the haroset, you can tell a lot about the history of your family.
Ils sont bons, hein? Very good. Délicieux, hein?
Very good.
Wow.
Here's
Very pretty. That's great.
Gail, you want to serve?
Sure.
I love to experiment all year long, except at Passover. Passover is the time to bring out the old traditional recipes so that my children will know that this is part of their history, not just the Seder itself, the symbolic foods, but even what they're eating. Now you're going to show me how you make your patties? Because you always put the patties
No, but I
in.
have to taste it.
Oh, taste it, please.
Sorry.
All right, taste it.
More salt and more pepper.
Before every Passover Seder, my mother-in-law and I make gefilte fish. It's her time to take center stage and to tell us the stories of her childhood.
All right.
And as she moves her hands, she tells us about living in a small town in Poland and the way that her mother used to make gefilte fish.
You just put it on the sides like this.
And you slide it in, right?
Yeah.
Although she doesn't say it, we know that her mother perished in one of the concentration camps.
As family and friends come together year after year, the table settings may change, along with the tenor of the evening. And while the story may reflect the accents of those who tell it, and the bitter herbs may be more or less bitter, Jews still remind themselves that this night is different from all other nights.
One thing that I really would like to think about while we're eating here is what we're going to say at the end of the Seder when we talk about next year in Jerusalem and what it means to you or what it means to you. The high point of the Seder ritual is the part that's not in the Haggadah. Over the meal, we're to look at what was said, what we did, and what's going on in our lives. And there's a spontaneity about that.
Today, as in the past, Jews all over the world have gathered in community halls and homes to commemorate the festival of Passover and to celebrate their traditions of freedom. Whatever their circumstances, their good fortune or adversity, they bless the wine, eat unleavened bread, and read aloud from the Haggadah, reaffirming the age-old traditions that define and sustain them as a people.
Throughout Jewish history, Passover has always been seen as the time of redemption, the time that always has the possibility and potential to be a redeeming moment. And so Jews, in whatever situation they found themselves, no matter how persecuted, no matter how difficult the circumstances, whether it was in the Soviet Union or in Ethiopia, at the moment of the Passover Seder, felt themselves to be on the verge of freedom and therefore inspired and strengthened to be able to go on no matter what their lot in life.
The endurance of Passover is inextricably linked to its adaptability.
The Seder ritual may seem the same, but we change. So with it, we change the ritual also. We have new eyes to look at the ancient words. So each year it becomes somewhat different, somewhat new, and much more exciting.
Now let my people free.
I am the Pharaoh. And yes, you may, if you believe. Get out of here.
If the ritual weren't open to continual reinterpretation and continual playing with meanings and being updated, it would have been lost a long time ago. The Seder is extremely resilient because it can be reinterpreted by the people who are creating it.
Throughout the Seder, we will honor the righteous women of our story when we fill and bless each cup of juice. This Seder is dedicated to them. Also note we have chosen to replace Elijah's cup with a cup of Miriam. We will honor both Elijah and Miriam when it's time to open the door.
Feminists have often argued that this is a male-dominated tradition, and yet they are able to both use the tradition to link themselves to the past, but also to make their contemporary experience relevant and important.
These traditions have played a very important role in the survival of the Jewish people for many, many years. The awareness of a historic dimension that is shared by yourself as well as other people, whether they be in Karachi, Pakistan, or whether they be in Caracas, Venezuela, anywhere. But they have that particular focal point of an event in history that was meaningful to all, certainly contributes to the unity of the Jewish people.
I have more, thank you.
It's always been my feeling that the Last Supper was in fact a Seder. And it is a reminder that in a very real sense, Judaism and Christianity have shared formative experiences. The Jews, 1,500 years after the Exodus from Egypt, were celebrating that event, the formative event of us as a people, as a nation, and as a religion. One of those celebrations then becomes a formative event in the founding of Christianity. And it should give us pause to remember how common our heritage is and how close we really are.
At the end of the Seder, we eat the hidden afikuman. Our Seder begins with matzah, it also ends with matzah.
Thank you for keeping the afikuman.
Yeah.
We go to eat the afikuman.
The last taste in our minds and in our mouth is supposed to be freedom.
Most of the Seder is geared to the children, retelling the story and keeping them involved.
Everyone gets involved. All who are hungry, let them come and eat. All who are curious, let them come and ask.
So everyone should take a piece, and remember, after this afikoman, we can only drink some water or the wine where we're allowed to. And this is the taste that's supposed to remain in our mouth. The difference between matzah and bread is a second, because matzah is water and flour, and it's mixed up, and it's been not allowed to stand more than 18 minutes. If it's 18 minutes and 1 second, it is already bread. Is there a lesson that you can learn from that? To me, the lesson is there are times that you have to grab the moment. You can't let things go. When it comes to liberty, it comes to freedom, and all the things that you said in the Manishtana, those are things that you don't waste time.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's interesting. When the time is right, you have to act. Doesn't mean you should always act, because this only happened after 10 plagues. This only happened after, right, Moshe went to Pharaoh and said time and again, please let my people go. And we really had to beat Pharaoh into submission. And so for all that time, you know, God could have zapped him right in the beginning. But for all that time, we waited and waited. But when the time is right, then you have to act.
How do you know the time is right? One of the ways you know the time is right is you study history, and that's what we're doing tonight. We're studying history, and we're digesting history.
We end the Seder by saying, Lashana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. We speak both of the physical Jerusalem and of the spiritual Jerusalem. So each year at the Seder, we commit ourselves to seek to perfect ourselves more, to be united as a people more, to pursue the values that made it worthwhile for us to be freed.
Jerusalem is a symbol of the practice of our religion. And the practice of our religion as tied to Passover means the practice of freedom. It's the freedom to enjoy our religion.
When we say next year in Jerusalem, we're saying many things. Some people mean, let's return to the temple. For me, when I think of Jerusalem, I think of peace, I think of equality, I think of faith in the eternal. All the lessons of freedom and love that come from the story of Passover.
The image of the rebuilt Jerusalem that we pray for at each Seder is a messianic image. The messianic image includes within it the idea of peace on earth, of freedom and brotherhood and love between all of humankind. That is intrinsic to the way we conclude the Seder, and it is really what we mean when we say, next year in Jerusalem, the rebuilt Jerusalem that serves as a beacon of peace, of hope, of light and love to all people of the world.
To order a video cassette of Passover Traditions of Freedom, call 1-800-709-8989. The cost is $29.95 plus shipping and handling. Credit cards are accepted. Passover Traditions of Freedom was made possible by funding from Hebrew National, makers of the kosher food products that answer to a higher authority. Additional funding was provided by these private foundations and individuals.